It had been months. Silence, not a peep, not a look, not one tried to contact me. I had stepped away from it all. I didn't wave farewell, didn't scribble a letter, didn't even glance back at her. Lila, the lady I adored, the one I wed, had crushed me in a way I couldn't grasp at all. Her cheating wasn't some big, flashy movie scene. It wasn't one of those loud showdowns where you barge in and spot them, caught in the act. No, it was the tiny clues, the small changes, the stuff I'd ignored for too long. Her chilly touch, the late hours at work. Her phone always flipped over or muted. I had seen it, but I chose to overlook it. Until that one evening, I just returned from a tiring, endless day, my thoughts jumbled with job stress, expenses, everything that felt overwhelming. But then, when I grabbed my phone, it struck me. It wasn't a furious argument. No. Yelling. No blame thrown around. It was just a text, and the words hit me like a blow. To my stomach, they sank into my heart, stealing the breath from my chest. I didn't need to reread it to know what had gone down. Everything I believed about us broke apart right then. I didn't shout, didn't weep. I just left. There was no reason to stick around anymore. When someone deceives you like that, it's not about figuring out why. It's about realizing they've picked something or someone else. And I couldn't stay. The days after blurred together. I didn't want to face anything, anyone. I longed to erase it all, to block out the world. Pals checked in. Relatives pushed me to step outside, to catch my breath, but I couldn't. I felt empty. The betrayal gnawed at me, and I didn't want to own up to it, but it lingered, always, there, wearing me down. I moved into a tiny flat, far from the life I once had. I tried to start over, to find calm amid the storm, but it was tough. The nights were the worst. The quiet was overpowering. Every bare spot in my place felt like a mirror of the emptiness she'd left. I kept telling myself she'd made her decision, that she'd crossed a boundary with no return. But sometimes I missed her. Sometimes I wondered if she felt the same ache I did. Then I'd snap myself out of it. She'd chosen, she'd abandoned me. Then, 6 months later, a message popped up. Lila's name glowed on my screen. My heart froze. I stood still, unable to stir, unable to breathe. A flood of mixed feelings hit me. Rage, puzzlement, shock. What could she want now? After all this, I wrestled with whether to dismiss it, to cut her out for good. But a piece of me, the piece I loathed, needed to hear her out. I had to know what she wanted to say. I asked her to meet me at the coffee shop, the same spot we used to visit years back. It was one of the few places I could handle where memories wouldn't crush me. I got there early, settling at a table in the far corner. My hands shook, but I made myself stay steady. My thoughts raced. When Lila stepped in, my pulse jumped. She looked familiar, yet different. Her hair was cropped, and faint traces of weariness showed beneath her eyes. It was like she'd aged half a decade in the months we'd been apart. When she spotted me, her eyes filled with tears. She paused there for a second, unsure if she should approach. But at last, she sat. Her voice was soft, almost a murmur. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, gazing at her. I had pictured this scene so often, but now that it was happening, I couldn't find the right words. The pain still stung, sharp and new. Lila spoke once more, her voice shaky. "I've longed for you. I know I messed up, and I feel awful about it all. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to think she was still the lady I once cherished. But as she sat there, fragile and torn, something deep down whispered she wasn't the same anymore and never would be. I didn't plan for it to go that way," she said, her eyes shining with tears she held back. I believed I could manage it. I thought I could juggle both of you in my world. But when I lost you, I saw how much you mattered to me. Her words struck me, but not how I'd hoped. My heart thumped hard, and I saw the real story. This wasn't the sorry I dreamed of. It wasn't enough. Words couldn't mend what she'd shattered. I swallowed, my voice calm but icy. What's this about? Do you want me back? Or are you just seeing you lost your fallback? Her expression dropped, and for the first time, I caught the honesty in her gaze. She didn't yearn for me. She craved how I'd made her feel. She missed the ease, the safety I'd given, the life she thought we shared. She hadn't returned because she couldn't survive without me. She came because her other plan flopped. Her fresh start hadn't worked out like she dreamed, and now she wanted to check if I was still there for her. I rose, feeling the truth sink in heavy. The clearness was staggering. I think you should leave, I said, my tone solid. She didn't fight, didn't try to sway me. She just nodded, her face cloaked in sorrow and shame, and then she walked out. I lingered, watching her go. The burden of that moment felt deeper than anything I had known in months. But as I strolled away from the coffee shop, a quiet calm flowed over me. I'd made the right call. But here's the surprise. The part one never saw coming. As I headed to my car, I peeked at my phone. Another message waited. It was from Lila, but this time it wasn't the typical "I miss you" note. It was raw truth. I didn't just want you back because I slipped up. I wanted you because I learned something about myself. I've been leaning on people, making them feel useful to patch the hole inside me. But what we had was true. I get that now, and I'm so sorry, more than you'll ever grasp. I stared at the text. It wasn't an "I'm sorry for what she'd done to me," nor a plea to patch things up. It was her seeing she'd been broken too, that her guilt sprang from losing the one thing that ever made her feel complete. And right then, I knew sometimes the toughest part is letting someone face their own hurt too, finally see what they had. But it was too late for us both. I erased the message, not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned something about myself too. The past was gone. Her sorrow didn't shift a thing. I wasn't going to hang around for someone who only saw my value after I was gone. I'd stepped away from it all once, and now I was leaving her behind again, this time forever. If you're holding out for someone to figure out what they've thrown away, stop. If they return, keep this in mind. They don't pine for you. They crave how you made them feel. And that, my pal, isn't love. It's just regret.